Okay, here we go. Right at the end of the book of Exodus. Actually, we're pretty close. In fact, we finished, didn't we?
Finished it today.
So there's an anomaly there that contains one of the keys to understanding the unique challenge of being a Jew. But first, a little bit of background. The tabernacle at this point is finally complete. So now, on the 1st of Nisan, 1 year after the Exodus, Moses assembles the tabernacle, he puts in the furniture, and he puts the vessels in place. And the language that's used here, the language of completing the tabernacle, actually echoes the language that is used to describe the completion of creation in the book of Genesis. The meaning of this is profound. The creation of the tabernacle is the human parallel to God's creation of the universe. In making the world, God creates a home for human beings. In making the tabernacle, human beings create a home for God. So the book of Genesis begins with God making the cosmos. The book of Exodus ends with human beings making a miniature symbolic universe in the form of the tabernacle. The two books together form a seamless narrative that begins and ends with God-filled space, but with one important difference. In the beginning, this work is accomplished by God the Creator, but by the end, the work is done by human beings. And this whole story has one great theme: the transfer of the responsibility for creation from heaven to earth, from God to the image of God. That's the background. The final verses of Exodus go on to tell us about the relationship between the cloud of glory and the tabernacle. As we heard, the tabernacle basically is a portable tent. It could be dismantled and carried stage by stage of the Israelite journey. And when the time came for the Israelites to move on, the cloud moved from its resting place in the tent of meeting to a position outside the camp, signaling the new direction in which the Israelites would now travel. When the cloud lifted and moved on ahead, the Israelites knew they were about to travel. However, the cloud was not over the tabernacle in all their journeys, as it says in the Torah. On the contrary, the cloud was there only when they stopped traveling and pitched camp. During the journeys, the cloud went on ahead of the people. So, noting this anomaly, Rashi comments, the place where the Israelites encamped is also called Masa, a journey, because from the place of encampment they set out again on a new journey, and therefore even an encampment is called a journey. So here Rashi sums up a great truth. One lies at the very heart of Jewish identity, and that truth is, as long as we haven't reached our destination, even a place of rest is still called a journey, because we know we're not going to be there forever. There's still some distance to travel before we can say the word home. In the words of the poet Robert Frost, the woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. To be a Jew means knowing wherever we happen to find ourselves is only a layover and not yet home. It means knowing after a day, a week, a year, a century, or even a millennium, we're going to have to move on. Thus, the portable tabernacle, even more than the temple in Jerusalem, became the primary symbol of Jewish life. The gods of the ancient world always had a specific domain. In the ancient world, geography was theology. In that location, the gods ruled and exercised power over the city or the empire. Thus, when Pharaoh says to Moses, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go?" he's really saying, Egypt has its own gods. Within its boundaries, they alone rule, and they've delegated that power to me, their earthly representative. However, Moses revives the idea that God, being everywhere, cannot be confined to a specific place. And even in the land of Israel, God's presence among the people depends on their behavior. Thus, there's no such thing as physical security. Security belongs not to a physical place located somewhere on planet Earth, but to a spiritual place located within the heart. This is the key to Jewish identity. The sole reason we've never converted nor assimilated over all these centuries is that we never mistook a temporary location for our ultimate destination. Now we're here in exile, we say at the beginning of the Passover Seder, but next year in the land of Israel. And over the millennia, this theme has been rehearsed over and over again, with the destruction of the two temples, with the Bar Kokhba revolt, and with some 109 different expulsions from Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East between the years 250 and 1948. In 1988, the Dalai Lama, who's lived in exile since 1951, invited a delegation of Jewish scholars to visit him in northern India. Realizing that it might be many years before the Dalai Lama and his followers would be allowed to go home, he asked the question, how can a people sustain itself when they're forced to live far from home? The Dalai Lama realized one group above all had faced and solved this problem for some 25 centuries. So he turned to them for advice. The Dalai Lama, in his wisdom, recognized something unique in the Jewish capacity never to lose faith in eventually returning home. How and why it happened that way is actually contained in the simple words of Rashi at the end of the book of Exodus. Even when at rest, our ancestors knew one day they'd have to uproot their tents, dismantle the tabernacle, and move on. A people that never stops traveling is one that never really grows old. Even as it lives in the present, it's always conscious of the past and the ever-beckoning future. Once again, in the words of Robert Frost, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.